Welcome to Sober October. This is definitely not beer thunder because it's coffee thunder. I'm doing a thing. I'm calling it Sober October because I'm just getting kind of tired of drinking beer. Like I'm just kind of like at the point where I'm gonna try to take a month long break and see what raw dogging life is like. And speaking of raw dogging, we're back in props because the way that I like to structure my channels, I like to kind of bounce around to do different things. I like to showcase more than just like one aspect of the game. I don't like to be like the World War II guy or the top tier guy or the guy that always complains about the how War Thunder is. Although I am pretty good at that. Like I spent a lot of time in the military. I'm kind of a professional complainer. Like I know exactly what to complain about, know exactly how to bitch and complain, and I know that's why a lot of you guys come here. But this video is going to be a little bit different. I am upping my time limit just kind of to showcase a little bit more of what goes on in a sim game and kind of provide more than just kind of cutting my videos into clips of like, okay, this is the dogfight, I came in, I killed this guy, I came in and killed this guy. Give you guys a little bit more insight into the setup, a little bit more insight into kind of like how I play the game, how I enjoy it, and how you guys can probably take some of the things I do, hopefully apply them, and hopefully find some method to like enjoy sim. Now, speaking of enjoying sim, today I am flying out the LA-7, and I was going to do an F-86 F2 Saber video or like a Korean warjet thing, but then we had this game, and because it's recent enough and I want to be able to articulate my thoughts going into the game, I can't put this into the hard drive and then come back to it a month later, because I'll look at this a month from now and go, I honestly don't remember what I was thinking a month ago. So that's why we're getting a World War II video up, and we had a pretty good game in the LA-7 B-20. I'm flying out with Albatross here, and this is like one of those like really, really late at night games. It's probably like one of the last games of the day where there's not a lot of lobbies going on, and you just got to kind of like, you got to find where people are concentrating. I think for props, and I think generally in sim, that's kind of like my biggest piece of advice as far as enjoying the game mode at the start is like, you got to find where the people are, and you have to find maps that are kind of like, that fit the game size and kind of like what's going on. Like if you go to a prop game on Denmark or Afghanistan, I know I say this all the time, but I'm going to articulate it for every video. Those games are usually not very good. Those maps are 128 by 128, and if you're like 4v4 in props in a map that big, like you're just not going to see each other, and usually those maps attract people that are just kind of like grinding for bomb bases and points and stuff like that, and you're not really going to have a good time. On the other hand, Zhengzhou, I think, is a 64 by 64 kilometer map. I think this is basically the same size as a typical ARB map, and we have probably 10 or 12 players on each side, which means things like this are going to happen. We come into a furball here, and we just kind of like fly at low altitude with the LA-7, because the LA-7 is a plane that was introduced around, I want to say 1944, 1945, and it's a refinement and kind of like a pretty extensive redesign of the LA-5 series. They did some stuff. They moved like the intake from the top of the engine to the bottom of the engine, just kind of made the plane better all around. And I consider the LA-7 series in War Thunder to be kind of like distinctly different and separate from the LA-5 series. Like it's the same thing of like kind of comparing the BF-109Es, the square wing 109s, with the BF-109 late 109s, the round tipped ones. This plane, this is the B-20. This one sits at 5.7 in sim, and this is a 5.7 day. And I think at 5.7, this plane is pretty reasonable. It doesn't have any like overbearing performance benefits where it's just kind of like completely hold your hand, but you do have enough performance that you can really pretty reliably go in, get some kills, and it's not going to be particularly frustrating to play. What this plane does well is basically acceleration and speed at low altitude. It's not the outright fastest at 5.7. The 4.7 one for the battle rating is better, because 4.7 down to 3.7, you will very easily kind of like out accelerate and kind of outspeed most of the things that you're going to run into in that BR range, outside of like planes that are specifically tuned to be kind of hit and run mobiles that can only kind of do like the one thing, which is like the MB5 will outspeed you, which shouldn't be a surprise because that's what that plane is like basically good at. That's kind of the whole play style of the plane. You hit, you run, you go away. You can't really, you can turn fight in that plane for like a limited amount of time, but you can't really do it for very long. This plane, on the other hand, you do have a lot of that low altitude speed, you do have that acceleration. Like the acceleration on the LA7 is basically equal to that of the Yak 3 VK107. Probably a little bit worse than the Yak 3U on the top end, but overall, really good, really solid, really easy plane to fly. Really good cockpit too, by the way. Like when I'm looking for planes to play in sim and planes that I recommend for people, like I like to have a clear view of my 6 o'clock. I like to have a clear view of the tail because obviously that's where people are going to try to approach you from. Flying something like this, like even something like a P-47, going from like a Razorback to a bubble top, is like it's a pretty big, substantial difference because you don't have the chair blocking your rear view. And so it's a pretty big deal for me, and something that I think should be a pretty big deal for most players. If you notice that the way that I play, where I'm kind of looking around most of the time, I probably spend around 2/3 of my time kind of looking over like my back left shoulder, my back right shoulder, and doing clearing turns. But with clear visibility of the tail, I don't have to do as many clearing turns. I don't have to be as paranoid about what's behind me all of the time, and it means I can concentrate more on fighting. Now, with a lot of these engagements, I've got Albatross with me, and the way that I'm working this is basically I'm the designated wingman on some of these. He's the designated wingman on others. Where if you're the wingman, basically my job is to look behind us, watch behind him, make sure that when he's engaging someone, when he's tunnel visioned, that he has kind of like an early warning system. That's really all that you really have to do to understand how to two-man and sim. The other kind of like huge advantage here, just besides like being together, is like it's less boring. It's less boring to like have someone in VC to talk to, just kind of like hang out with, chill around, and we're try-harding here a little bit, but we're not like super duper try-harding. Like I'd consider super duper try-harding is like if we went to like 3,000 meters and we're like really, really particular about our engagements. Like no, we're just kind of like flying around low altitude, doing kind of like the thing the plane was designed to do at, because kind of towards the end of the war, Yak 3s, LA7s, stuff like that, like the Germans kind of decided that, hey, our planes are no longer competitive at low altitude in the same ways that they used to be. Try to avoid dogfighting the Russian planes now, because they finally, it took them a while, but they did finally kind of catch up in technology and proficiency and yada, yada, yada. Now, that's not a historically based opinion. That is not a well-researched based opinion. So if someone's in my comments going, well, actually, according to this book written by, like, Steven Zaloga, but of, like, the air, and says that, yes, like, towards the end of the war, pretty much everyone's planes, like, had problems. The Soviet planes probably never got all that great as far as reliability goes, as far as, like, pilot consistency goes. At the same time, and all the German planes also declined, too. So it's, like, kind of like, you got the trash heap versus the trash heap that are well-designed trash heaps, with the manufacturing quality probably wasn't all that great. And I can kind of like verify this, because I did go to the Seattle Air Museum, and I did see the only Yak 9U that's in the United States, and kind of like what stands out about that is just like the panel gaps between like the way that it's assembled. It's very I'm just gonna say it's very rustic, but anyways, LA7 pretty good. The Shavaks, the only thing the LA7 B20 really has is it's got an extra Shavak cannon. Otherwise, it's identical in performance. Actually, I said Shavak, but it's technically B20, which the B20 is a redesigned Shavak that is basically lighter. In War Thunder, that difference is a distinction without merit. Doesn't really matter. For the belts, though, I run the tracer belts. I think the tracer belts are the best. I think that's pretty much verified by kind of everyone that's used this thing. I'm pretty sure that's the consistent opinion across the board, so not any controversy there. The downside to the Shavaks is against bombers like the B-17 there. Like the B-17 takes a lot of damage from like fragmentation rounds, high explosive, like pure high explosive rounds like the MG-151 Mingashosa 30 miles are a lot better at breaking those. But we get damage. We're going to start heading back. We get a P-47 that comes in. And it kind of like my best advice for playing any kind of prop, anything whatsoever, especially with like good rear visibility to the 6, is you don't want to let people merge with you, get within gun range on your direct 6. And this means a lot of times I'm looking over my shoulder. I'm trying to set up for at least, if I'm surprised, I at least want to be able to turn out of the way of the guns. But ideally, I want to set up for basically a nose-to-nose, head-to-head, like a normal, like whatever, the way you normally set up for a dogfight, unless it's something that turns better that's like blatantly turns better. Like if I have a 0 behind me, obviously I'm probably going to shallow dive and extend and like spam the cover me call. But ideally, you don't want to have to start your defensive flying with your prompt being, I have 50 caliber tracers flying across my wings and this guy can't aim, because usually those guys can flail around enough and they'll just usually just shoot you out of the sky. Same thing at 5.7, you got to be really careful, because this is a really strong BR for a lot of nations. There's a lot of really good planes, and there's stuff that's broken, there's stuff that's overpowered. Like the F4U 4B, you can make a really strong argument for that. But the degree that which it is overpowered is a lot less than, say, for instance, like the P-39 at 3.0 fighting biplanes is more overpowered than, say, the 4B fighting like the LA-7. Yes, the 4B, if he's good, if he knows his landing flaps, if he knows all his stuff, like, yeah, I can kind of like just ride you like a train, and you'll be crying about it. But for the most part, the more the words hard, the more kind of like overpowered a plane is, the more it attracts like mediocre players. It attracts usually players that will play in a particular way where they don't really engage with like a lot of confidence. I think really the only exceptions to this is like people like kind of dick ride Greek Air Force being like, he's the best of all time, or people then do the opposite of that and go like, oh, he sucks. And it's like, nah, the guy's like just 50 years old and he just goes in and like just plays the game and like he's gonna try to turn fight everything anyways. And to me, I look at the guy, I'm like, guy's 50 years old, he's like retired. Here I am saying 50 years old is like retired age. Dude's like probably like agent, but like he goes in and like landing flaps and like he's not the best. He's good enough. It's an interesting challenge. Yes, the 4B is overpowered, but no, against a lot of stuff here, it's not usually like an unconquerable challenge. The only time it becomes unconquerable is when the guy's doing strict boom and zoom and then using the deck speed to kind of like run away directly at the airfield. And then at that point, that's not fun to deal with. That's not fun to deal with in any plane. It means that kind of any plane at this tier, any plane at any tier that's just kind of like the fastest on the deck, you can play a play style that's strict boom and zoom, run to the airfield to regain your altitude anytime you have disadvantage. But I don't do that because, number one, it's boring. Number two, like, I've already done the KD thing in ARB. I already have a couple planes that I have high KDs in just on this account for like proving the point that like KD in sim isn't super duper important, or it's not super duper important to really enjoying the game mode unless you want to look at the numbers. But anyways, like, it's my hot take. Like, it doesn't really matter. I also like it when, like, if people play against me, like, especially if, like, my viewers play against me, like, sometimes I'm not going to try to play in a way that's, like, he's totally unkillable, he never makes a mistake, and, like, cool. That'd be easy. Like, okay, cool. P-47, 9,000 meters. I'm only going to fight from 9,000 down to 7,000, but, like, cool. I'm going to spend 40 minutes flying around doing, like, watching paint dry. Not very fun. I play the game for the enjoyment of it. It's also why, like, I do more than, like, one thing. I don't just focus on top tier or props or jets or anything like that. It's also why, like, I do duels. Like, people are like, well, why do you do duels? It's, well, because they're fun. Because breaking the monotony of doing the same thing over and over is, like, keeps the game fresh and interesting. It's like, sometimes I play by myself. Sometimes I play with, like, one person. Sometimes, like, I'll have, like, 6 or 7 people, and we'll be like, we're gonna go bomb the ground battles with A-10s or something. Like, whatever. It's, like, different vibes for different days. Anyways, we do our first sortie. I didn't really talk about any of the engagements there, because, you know, I gotta pad the video for time, so I can talk about engagements in the second half. But basically, same thing, go back, repair, take off again. Did cut out some of the return to base sequence, because, like, it's obviously like flying in a straight line. You look at the map, and you fly to the base. I'm flying behind Albatross here, and we're going to go to another A point. We're going to seize it, and we're on Jeonju. And Jeonju's like one of those maps, at least this game, is like where the tickets seem to have worked in a way that is, like, seems more reasonable. Like, it seems like we're completing objectives quick enough that, like, the game is kind of over in a total of around probably about an hour, which I think is, like, is a pretty reasonable time limit for a sim game, especially for one that's this populated. Unfortunately, I do wish that games that were populated like this, I wish they'd go on for longer, but also when you start racking up a lot of kills, usually games kind of turn. They reach a point where like they have like a build up cycle. You get a bunch of people and then they kind of like slowly die off, and then the lobby splits at an hour and people can't get in. The lobby system's kind of a mess. But anyways, we're coming in. We're looking for the furball, and because there's an A point, obviously people should be flying towards the A point. The nice thing about having a low altitude fighter means that we can kind of approach things from bottom up and be a little bit more safer. We have a little bit more leeway than something that's kind of like a more of a strict high altitude fighter, a fighter that kind of relies on building up speed to kind of maintain safety, because it's just easier to see people that are co-altitude and above you, because obviously black dot on a white background is easier to find than black dot on like a dark green or sand background. Albatross goes up, he goes for a P-51, and I call like, hey dude, got a dude behind you, and he's gonna basically extend away, identify like what the plane is, and we're like, okay, it's a Wyvern, so you can kind of just turn fight that thing, because it's one of those planes that like it has to stay fast to stay safe. And this plane, because it's fast enough, usually you can kind of close the distance. But Wyvern decides to, looks like he's bailing out, so I'm not really too worried about him. Kind of got to figure that he's going to come back in probably a minute or two, but he has to extend away. He can't stick this fight. I have enough people around me. We have zeros too, which zeros are really kind of like they're kind of like, they're not great by themselves, but they also dictate the way that other planes around them have to fight. Because yes, a P-51 that starts on my 6 has a really good chance of killing me, but with the zero there, I don't really have to do a lot to kind of put the P-51 in a situation where he's not really going to get away from that. So P-51s, stuff like that, when you have a zero nearby, they have to come in, they have to attack at high speed, and they have to maintain probably around about 450 kph or greater to really have kind of a safe buffer zone from the zeros. So it's a difficult thing for newer players to master, and reading kind of like the point, reading the room, reading the momentum of like what's going on at the point it's a learned skill. It's not something that most players are going to like know right away. As people get more experience with sim, as people kind of understand what's going on, understand the matchups a little bit better, and just kind of understand like game sense of like my every time I'm up vertical in a stall at like 250 kph at kind of like medium altitude, I'm like I'm about to get third-party senses tingling, and I'm looking behind me and trying to dump the nose down to gain speed, because as long as you have like a little bit of speed, you can remain evasive and fight through it. We get a Corsair in front of us. He's booming, zooming, he's doing the right thing, and we come in with speed and we get that like nice little, probably like 800 meter shot. With shooting in this game, with what I've come to realize in probably the last like 6 months, is 800 meter vertical targeting for me is a really nice thing to have. It basically angles the guns up. It doesn't angle the sight down, which is probably like the way that it should be, but it angles basically the guns up, and it means that on deflection shots you have to look less over the nose. It also means at distance you're fine, and with nose guns the convergence doesn't really matter. With wide mounted wing guns, Spitfire stuff, I don't know that 800 meters convergence is going to be like ideal. Probably for something like that, 400, 250, maybe 500. Like P-47s, when I used to use those a lot, I kind of set the convergence probably 400 to 500, and now I'm running 800 on those as well, running 800 on everything. But I've also gotten a lot more confident in kind of like how far I can shoot in the last like 6 months as well. And part of this is just working in it. Part of it is just being disciplined. Part of it's just like my brain gets triggered when I see a good shot, so I'm going to hold my fire until I think I can get a good shot. But that also doesn't mean that I don't take shots that are not risky or not safe. Like if I got a dude that's like chasing my buddy down and I need to break him the hell off, I might just spray and pray a little bit and be like, well, give him a shot just across his nose and hope for the best. We get another furball here, and with the furballs and stuff like that, the way that I find these is, number one, you find the cover calls on the map, you find the A points, you find that stuff, and you're always looking for these wingtip vortices. And if you're playing a little bit low altitude, you can always kind of like dive down and then look up if you're not finding anyone. And even in your boom and zoom planes, this usually works pretty well. Because like a P-47, you come in at 900 kph, basically at rip speed, go down to 0 altitude, look around real quick, and while you're zooming up, you're like, oh, cool, I see a couple of dots over here, and you get your altitude back most of the way, and you're usually pretty safe. Come in, get another plane. I can't tell what it is in the preview here. The preview is a little bit low resolution. I think it's a Yak 3, but we'll say whatever it is. And we're kind of dominating the points here. And Albatross is in front of me. I'm gonna basically tell him every time I see him go in front of me, every time he's behind me, it's like, okay, cool. I'm gonna cover your 6, and basically I should be looking behind me most of the time, but I gotta like look at him, keep track of him, and this is all like voice communication as well. Usually what happens is after the point's done, we'll just like pick a direction, pick a grid square, usually the center of the map, because like if you're just kind of like wandering around the center of the map, you'll generally find people at some point. Same thing with like bomb points. If you know where their airfields are, you know where the bomb point is, the logical conclusion is that the bombers will fly from the airfield to the bomb point. So if you put yourself over a bomb point or in between a bomb point, same thing with like ground battles. Like if you read the kill feed and know kind of like what's going on, you can kind of like figure out where to go. LA7 though, coming around here, we get one guy. I can't tell if this is a friendly or an enemy like right away, but just based on like the way he approaches things, assuming it's an enemy, this looks like a C205, and we're gonna we insert directly on his 6. He goes up, he yo-yos kind of back in front of us. We shoot, and we're not hitting yet, but we're gonna hit. This is kind of like the best position to be in. Like if you're in a position where you're just directly behind the enemy plane within gun range, and they give it to you right away, it's kind of free. It's also why like when I'm in a point, I'm always doing like a consistent turn just to kind of like clear myself. And even if I like expect an enemy or a friendly like is behind me, until I confirm that they're a friendly, I'm still gonna set up for like at least like not like the super duper defensive like let him behind me on my 6 o'clock merge thing. Same thing with the A point. Obviously we're in the A point. It's kind of like at the top of the map, kind of in the middle of the map. The direction that I should be looking is going to be primarily focused from the point to their airfield, because obviously the guys that are going to be coming in are probably going to be coming from that airfield. They're probably not going to be coming from our airfield. Kind of like a logical step here. This looks like a Spitfire. I'm just kind of coming around just to insert directly behind it, and this really is like the majority of kills in a lot of the games for like all these kind of like high kill games that a lot of people get. It's like you get people that are unaware. You get Spitfire, he flat spins, we're gonna shoot, we get severe damage, and he's gonna fall out of the sky. We get a Corsair, looks like right there. I think Albatross dealt with him. We get an A6M on the point, so this means that even if I'm defensive, I can kind of like rely on him to force the other enemies fast, but also because the enemies will see that he is here, they're going to remain fast, hopefully. So I kind of try to maintain speed. We set up for that guy. He doesn't get a merge behind us. He comes in fast. We lag pursuit. We come down. 0 is somewhere around. Albatross is lashed behind him. At this point, I'm like, okay, this is your target. I'm still going to try to steal it, because like when I play with friends, it's kind of like after the fact, it looks really cool, but when we're doing it, it's just kind of a clusterfuck, and like we're pretty like casual about it usually. I can't put like, I would not be able to put our conversations on YouTube because well, it'd probably violate TOS, but I'm covering him. We get a Corsair that comes in. This guy like didn't notice me. He was probably focused on the cover call, focused on clearing his friendly, and he just kind of inserts in front of me. We drop flaps a little bit, we cut throttle, we just kind of sit behind him. And this is an F4U1C, by the way, which is at 4.7 to 5.7 is not a very good plane. You can kind of distinguish the 1C based on the paint job on the bottom, the white bits. It's also kind of like I think a lighter blue color. So it's not a 4B, so not really too worried about that. That plane is at 4.7, not very good. 5.7, pretty like abysmal. Like the F4U4B exists, and at this tier, that's the plane that you should be flying if you want to fly a Corsair. But he comes in, we get the point, we're getting the point again, and we're back into like the covering position. And if you haven't like paid attention the whole game, we haven't really gone above 3,000 meters. This is kind of like the bread and butter of the Soviet Air Force. This like tactical aviation kind of covering like battlefield things if you were going to go into like your super deep immersion stuff. It also means that we haven't really taken the LA-7 to an altitude where it loses its war emergency power, doesn't lose the speed and acceleration. That kind of makes the plane really, really good at low altitude. At higher altitudes, it's not that hard to outpower the plane. It's not that hard to outspeed the plane. And the plane, once it gets slow, is kind of sluggish. But at low altitude, you can go slow, get sluggish, put the nose down, and then you have your speed back really quickly, which means that you have a really, really viable package that's a really good all-around plane. Especially at 4.7. I can't stress enough, 4.7, the LA-7 is one of the best 4.7s in the game. At 5.7, it's you could make the argument that if everyone plays their 5.7 Metamobile to the utmost, that the LA-7B would be kind of like 4B could destroy you. P-51 D-30 could also destroy you just because like it's faster, he carries speed up higher. If he's good at aiming, yeah, can do it. Most people don't. I don't really go out of my way to play perfectly optimally all of the time, and I don't expect other players to do the same as well. On the other hand, there's a lot of things kind of like in this BR. They're okay. Nothing like fantastic. Like the C205, the N2. This guy's playing a 4.7 plane at 5.7, and that is rough. I think that is really rough. I don't think the N2 is all that good. I think it's the same thing as the C205, but it's in the same boat as this plane. They took a plane that's 4.7, added another gun to it, and they made it 5.7. And that plane has had a good bit of flight model changes over the years, where when I first started playing the game, that plane it was basically like a slightly better 109, slightly worse technically. It was basically kind of like split the difference between like a G55 and a 109. I think right now it's kind of like splitting the difference between like a 109 and a FW190. But I don't know, I haven't played the plane in a long time, so it's like one of those planes I should probably go out and revisit before I'm actually super duper confident in. But anyways, about 40 minutes into the game here for us, we're winning on tickets. Things have gone very smoothly. We've covered each other. We've done some basic fighter maneuvering, and we've just been like, this was a good game. This was like a good one to like, hey, we finished this one. I'm like, I'm tired. You're tired. This is a good way to finish out a night. This is kind of like what the best of what Sim can be on a good day. This is an example of a good game. At the same time, like when we're having a good game though, like War Thunder is kind of like a zero-sum fun game, because if we're doing good, that means someone else has to be doing badly. This is also like, I don't go out of my way to fly exactly by doctrine to like the utmost of like, I don't want the whole entire player base to quit the game because they see like two people join, like, oh, these guys are too good, we're just gonna get farmed, and it's not gonna be a fun fight. Like, I want people to have like a chance of like actual like fun fights, because obviously if the game's not fun for most players, people aren't gonna play it. People are gonna go do different things. But we're finishing up. I think we're chasing down an F4U4, and I think we're just kind of like flying towards the airfield. Tickets are over. We get one more tick left, and I think we had a guy come in and leave, but I can't tell. I got the preview on, but it's low res, so I can't tell. I do see a dot like off of the 12, and I haven't looked at the map. I don't realize that we're going like directly at the airfield, but like whatever, we'll get a final kill, and we see two. This guy's turning up and in front. Got another one up and above. Looks like a bomber trying to return to base, if I recall correctly. And I'm gonna have like a little bit of a doggy dog fight against one guy here. I'm gonna see when do we get to the Merg though. Gotta be staring at the. I need to like just do these things with like the preview turned into high definition so I can tell what's going on. We get an F4U4. He merges below us, but we're coming in with like so much speed. We're near our max speed that I'm gonna go out like pretty far, just kind of go vertical. And if he's cracked on the guns, like he can hit those. If he came in with speed and kind of kept me closer, this would be like pretty risky. But we basically he's not stalled out, but he has to point the nose down to keep from stalling out. That gives us our position. We come in, nice pure, basically pure 6 o'clock shot. He's gonna try to use the airfield to save himself, but it's not gonna be enough. We have we got the 3 Shabaks, and we finished up 14 kills, 0 deaths. This is an exceptional game. This is like just one of those. I'm not gonna say it's a fluke because yeah, I could probably do it more often, but also I do like to program in like a little bit of like, you know, casualness to like allow people to like have a chance of killing me because like Sim is not that big of a deal. My KD is not that big of a deal. I just play this stuff for fun. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed me rambling for 30 minutes. Those are the rewards. And stay sober in October.